Chris. How you doing?
Great. Good morning.
Excellent. Thanks for being on with us. Really excited to have Chris McCarthy, longtime consulting services, great go-to-market executive, been around some great companies that you will hear more about. And typically that consulting services is kind of sidebar as opposed to core to a lot of companies. I think I'll have some terrific insights of how you can leverage it to help you sell more. For those that are members of Sales Community, thanks. For those that are not, Chris Decker behind the scenes here will hopefully pull up. You can go to salescommunity.com/fall-free and get a free membership. Tucker this week is away in Spain on his honeymoon, so I know he's having a great time. And we have Chris Decker from Salescast pinch hitting. So Chris Decker, thank you very much for your help. Salescast is a great partner of Sales Community. They help with all the great follow-on tidbits and slicing and dicing and posting and reposting and all that we do with these podcasts that you can always look up each week. Also brought to you by X Factor. They've got an awesome annual operating plan. So the tagline, annual operating plan, so you can always have a great operating plan. And they also have a great from Legacy Decision Link that they had acquired. It's also a great value selling platform. So we'll talk a little bit more about value selling later. And then Chris Decker, don't forget, if you can post the salescommunity.com/fall-free, that would be great. So thank you very much for that. Let's see here. So you live in Middlebury, Connecticut. I grew up in New Haven, a little close to that. And not only are you a golfer, you're a very competitive golfer with the 2 handicaps. So that's very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you.
We could do some damage with my 19.
Absolutely.
So for introductions, we actually had worked together at HP. So really enjoyed that. Great partner in crime. Typically, again, services is kind of pushed to the side, but you always did a great job mainstream, making it, let's leveraging, joint go-to-market. How can we kind of help each other out? How do you leverage that to be a competitive differentiator, which we'll talk about. So from Robert Rye says, Chris is a great example of an accomplished business leader that truly knows how to manage all aspects of a P&L to deliver predictable financial results quarter after quarter, a fabulous team player. Scott Clark, who's here in Wellesley, says Chris is a strong technology industry veteran who is also an outstanding career working for companies like IBM, EMC, Cisco, HP, HPE, and Microsoft, where he's built strong relationships with sales teams, partners, and clients to innovate and deliver real technology-based solutions that drive measurable business outcomes. As such, he has always been a leader focused on customer experience-based selling and services where the value delivered is based on customer results, not technology capabilities. And Scott Dunsire, a longtime friend for both of us, says, I've had the pleasure of working with Chris at HPE. Chris is the ultimate team player who listens, partners, and provides valuable insight to solve difficult challenges. And additionally, I've hired Chris as an advisor to help us build out our go-to-market cloud offering. So very cool there. It can probably help out a lot of other companies too, I would think. His experience along with his valuable input and relationships have helped shape what I know will be a successful practice area for us here at Melillo Consulting. In addition, Chris is a damn good golfer. So especially with that too there for sure. So let's jump into the questions. So college, you went to Concordia College, played varsity tennis, and I guess it is now Iona. What was your first job out of college?
Yeah, my first job was with IBM. I actually worked all of my summers during college, including my last full year. So I was playing varsity tennis and working at the same time. I don't know how I pulled that off. I was a second generation IBMer, so both my parents had worked for the company. And so naturally, that's where mom and dad wanted you to go next. So I ended up with IBM coming out of school. There was actually a gap, Randy. I'll tell you a funny story. IBM, this was 1986 timeframe, was going through a bit of a tough time financially. And so they had put a freeze on all hiring. And I wanted to work for IBM in the worst way. long story short, there was a sales rep in the local office that I was in who said, hey, I went to college with a couple of guys who work for this technology company up in Natick, Mass, and they're hiring like crazy. You may want to, go interview with them. And so long story short, it was EMC over there on Speen Street in Natick. And I went up on a Friday in February, and it was a snowstorm the night before. It did the full round of interviews, as you probably remember in those days. And at the end of the afternoon, the recruiter said to me, hey, great job, looking great. We want to do another round. Would you like to come back again tomorrow? And I said, yeah, but tomorrow's Saturday. He says, no, I know. We work a half a day here on Saturday.
Yeah.
And so I knew I was really lining up with a real sales-oriented company, and spent the morning on Saturday interviewing with some of the Egan fellas. So pretty cool time.
Awesome. Yeah, so a great story. I had we called it telemarketing at the time, was a SDRs, BDR. So it was May of '85. I was the 33rd employee. So did that for a few months, and then I ran that group. So kind of my secret in interviewing was Dick Egan's wife Maureen was a receptionist in the front there where you walk in. So we do the interview, everything else, but kind of a huge factor was, okay, Maureen, how did they treat you, right? And there'd be some guys who wouldn't give her the time of day, guys or girls, wouldn't give her the time of day, or just rude or nasty. And even if they interviewed great, I'm like, all right, forget about it. And then, if they'd say, oh, what happened? Everybody liked me, everything else. Yeah. So you really didn't treat our receptionist very well, did you? And so for a lot of people, I think that was a huge wake up call. And conversely, for those that did, you want those people when nobody's watching, the guard is down, who are authentic, real, nice, pleasant, right? Those are the people that you want. So anyway, well, lots of good. Cool. Lots of good times there, for sure. So, and then what about just go through your career briefly, if you can.
Yeah. So I literally, the first job out of college, believe it or not, was selling copiers for IBM. And IBM was still in that business in those days, about another year and a half, 2 years. And you talk about, just core, hardcore kind of selling. I mean, it was, I'll never forget one of my first business reviews with one of the regional managers. We got together, and I had taken a slide from an old friend that I had worked for when I was in college. And it was very simple. Calls plus demos equal sales, right? It's just get out there, make calls on customers, as many calls as you can make in a day, try to get them in for a demo. And that will eventually lead to, some number of sales. And so, my background started in as hardcore in that business as you can get. And in those days, Kodak and Xerox were the players, not IBM.
Wow.
Then I went on. So after IBM sold that business to Kodak, interestingly, I then went through the traditional IBM training program, came out a year later, got a territory, sold mid-range systems, AS400s and RS6000s and, storage and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until several years, quite a few number of years later, that I started to kind of get into this world of services. Actually, it was 12 years later that I really started to kind of move into that world of services inside of IBM before I left. And then I went over to EMC, where EMC was building up a services business coming out of the 90s. Things were getting a little bit more complicated in terms of the portfolio. And so Pat Weber hired me to lead the Northeast and Canada, and did that for a couple of years, went into the kind of the worldwide function, and then got recruited to Cisco, where Cisco was building a storage area networking fiber channel platform. They thought I knew something about that. So went over there and had a great run for 10 years at Cisco. And midway through, I was called one Saturday morning in December, literally sitting where I am right now. And I was asked to stop everything I was doing and get in the middle of taking a look at a joint venture between Cisco, EMC, and VMware. And here's 2 PowerPoint slides. We just presented this to Joe Tucci and John Chambers and Paul Moritz. And you got 45 days. You're going to go build a small team with EMC and VMware, lock yourselves in a room in Hopkinton, and come out with a plan to invest in or not in putting together a joint venture. And honestly, Randy, I thought it was going to be one of these typical 45-day go do kinds of jobs. And then I'd go back to what I was doing. It became roughly 2 years of my life, and probably the most exciting and exhilarating 2 years I've ever had, because it was literally a startup, well funded, but it was literally a startup with a startup culture, and you were really putting together a business from the ground up. And of course, the legacy there is the business became about a $2 billion business, created a whole new market category around converged infrastructure. And it gave all parties exactly what they were looking for. If you remember, you probably do. In fact, I know you do. This was at a time when Cisco was coming out with the unified compute platform, and they had no presence in the data center to speak of. And this was all about getting that foot into the data center with real data center companies like EMC. Did that. Left Cisco a couple of years afterwards, and ended up over at HP, which obviously became HPE. I was leading all of the services in the Americas, working for Robert with Scott Dunsire, and then did that for about 4.5 years, and then decided I wanted to get into the world of software and cloud and the new generation of things. And ended up over at Microsoft, where I had a great 5-year run leading services and support for the U.S. In the financial services segment. So real brief, quick tour of 35 some odd years of career here.
Awesome. That's great. And then now you're basically taking that and doing your own consulting business, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I decided, before I hang it up, I really want to get back into a situation like the VCE situation, building something, contributing to something. I wouldn't say necessarily only from the ground up, but something smaller. Of course, everything other than Microsoft is going to be smaller, but where I could have a much wider impact, maybe more of an operating kind of a role. And as I think you remember back in the springtime, you and I had a chat, and you said, "Hey, Chris, good on you. Wish you luck. Give you all the help I can give you, but here's my recommendation: go set up an LLC. Go get yourself a credit card. Start networking with all the people in the industry, and chances are you're going to have some opportunities to take some of that experience." And impart it. And sure enough, that's where Scott and I connected. And I'm helping Scott and Mark and their team with go-to-market and practice development around a Microsoft practice. And then I've also gotten some work with a small data mobility software company, well known in the industry. So I'm helping them on a number of partnerships and go-to-market kinds of activities. And then, interestingly,
what company is that?
It's called Cirrus Data Solutions. Okay. Yeah, some of the founders from Falcon Store and Cheyenne Software and others. Really great product in that space. And then through just a kind of an interesting relationship, I was asked to work for or provide some services to a private equity out of New York. I can't name the company. But I'm helping some of their managing directors who are sitting on the boards of some of these public companies work through some strategy and some acquisition integration stuff that they're working with through some of their portfolio companies. So pretty wide and diverse kind of set of things. I never would have expected that when I decided to leave Microsoft, but it's been incredibly fulfilling. And is really testing a lot of experience, knowledge that I've hopefully accumulated over the career. And I can't thank you enough for your urging of me to do that.
Oh yeah, no worries. Well, yeah, we'll check in a year from now. So what's next for you? Going to keep doing that, or?
It's a great question. I am enjoying that. I do want to get back into a company in a little bit more of a permanent basis. I'm kind of fine tuning that into size and shape and kind of industry or sector, I should say, of the tech space. But for now, this is absolutely fulfilling, and it's keeping the right balance for me. And I think balance is really the important part, right? Is finding that right balance of work and play and family and everything else that's going on. And right now, this is doing it. But I do think I would like to get back into something on a more permanent basis.
Oh, awesome! There you go. All right. Well, companies watching these would be a great find for sure.
Sure.
So our title topic is leveraging services and consulting as a competitive advantage. So just to kind of level set, kind of give us a kind of basic definition first, maybe of the services and consulting.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Pretty much every one of those companies that I've been a part of have evolved their businesses from classic technology into services with solutions, or let me say it differently, solutions that are founded in services. And with the exception of IBM at that moment in time, which had to go into the services business really as a means of survival, every one of the other tech companies were in the services business. I would probably sum it up in one or two words, which is really around driving the adoption and or consumption of the technologies. An interesting story, I remember this vividly. We were in Las Vegas. I was at EMC, and we had a bunch of services sellers in a room for a couple of days of some training. And we invited Joe Tucci to come in and just spend a few minutes talking to the group about EMC, what's happening, the evolution. He had been about a year into the company. And we were asking him to really kind of prioritize services. And he stopped and he said, you know what, guys, look, I'll be happy to do all that. But I want to make it clear. We're a technology company at the core. We're not a services company, right? And if you're asking me to go into that room and tell them that we're a services first company, I'm going to go back to what I was just doing, and I'll let you guys do that. And I don't think Joe was trying to be flip, but it really just solidified for me, why are we in this business, right? And what is that purpose? And it was all about aligning with your go-to-market, your technology, and how do you drive success and outcomes with customers based on that technology. And sure enough, went to Cisco. A little bit of a different purpose, right? They were starting to get into newer technology areas, unified compute, storage, security, a lot of other areas, which they weren't known for. And services was going to be a way that would propel them into these new and emerging markets that they weren't really known to be a player in. Similar story at HP, minus the EDS part of HP in those days, right? That was a different reason, but the business that we were in the product part of the business, it was all about enabling technologies. And then similarly at Microsoft. And so it's that adoption and consumption purpose that these companies are in this thing for. And then you layer on top of that the fact that every one of these companies have vast partner ecosystems, right? Mm-hmm. From small VARs all the way up to the large GSIs. And, Kevin's topic last week really hit home with me because you have to balance that in that ecosystem. And how do you balance, a services business, that's native, if you will, to the tech company with all of these other partners in this partner ecosystem. And you can do that, right? You absolutely can do that. It should not be an or, it's an and, right? When you're working with them. And so you have to have that mindset around how do you, extend, leverage, create scale, not just in the delivery, but in the go-to-market and delivery of these solutions in these tech companies. And so it's been a real learning for me over probably the last 20, 25 years since I left IBM. Because in IBM, it was IBM or nothing, right? And that was the whole purpose of the services business. But since then, it has been what I've just described. And I think there's a further evolution that's happening, in these tech companies where they're moving from, classic professional type services or consulting or whatever you want to call it, and support into this world of customer success. And we can talk about that. But that to me is an emerging kind of trend that I'm seeing in a lot of these tech companies. And I think lines up with this notion of value-based selling, outcome-based selling that we're talking about today.
Gotcha. That is interesting, right? So IBM spun out Kyndryl, the services business, right, to do that. But then now, I was talking to some folks the other night at Kyndryl. Now, IBM's kind of starting to, respin and compete, which is interesting.
Very interesting, confusing and interesting at the same time.
Yeah. So you touched on it. So in terms of how you see this evolving, you see it evolving into customer success, the kind of services consulting businesses at the tech companies.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, and you know this, Randy, right? Customers don't buy things. There are customers that do buy things, right? But by and large, what customers are looking for are outcomes. And they're looking for partners, tech partners, who are going to be co-invested and willing to co-innovate with them, right? This is a big thing, right? Especially with where these technologies are going. If you just think about AI, I mean, this is a whole new horizon for everyone, right? And there's a shortage of talent in the market. There's a shortage of expertise to deliver on this talent. And so what they're looking for is this co-investment, co-innovation. And part of this is around how do you get to the table and really get intimate with my business, right? And that's not just at an industry and sub-industry level, but that's even down into, that very specific thing that room in the house is dealing with, right? In that customer at that moment in time. And to the extent that you're willing to get down into that level and really think, have a hard think about how to innovate, how to apply the technology that you have to go solve that problem and deliver that outcome. That's where this customer success is coming from. And it's really around stickiness, right? And creating that stickiness of your technology, that long-term adoption. And so it's an evolution. And again, it's intended really to be complementary to, in these larger tech companies at least, the partner ecosystems that they try to balance, right? From small to very large.
Yeah, absolutely. So now what about the struggles, or there's always kind of a tug of war, right? You've got I'll say the product, whether it's hardware, software, you got the product sellers who may not be good at kind of understanding the services side. And then you got the services, kind of sellers, support team, all that, who really does think, hey, we should be services only, and we should not be doing that kind of collaboration. It's not an account P&L. It's, hey, we're worried about our services P&L. So kind of how you've kind of navigated those dynamics.
Yeah, in every one of these companies that I've gone into, that was pretty much the structure. And right off the bat, there's that conflict that occurs. And call me a bit of a masochist in this way. I love those opportunities, right? Because to me, that's the opportunity to create that kind of tissue between, what the product sales organization, who's measured in weeks and months and quarters, and compensated in that fashion, with the reality that, hey, services will slow my deal down. It's going to put an unnecessary tax on my deal. It's going to complicate things. It might even, distract my customer. And so finding this connective tissue between the motivation of selling the technology with, architecting the solution, and how do services become part of that earlier in the sales cycle, not as an attachment, a SKU attachment at the back end of the sales cycle. And oh, by the way, can it be used as a differentiator to accelerate that solution and that buy from the customer, and oftentimes make it more profitable, obviously make it more sticky, and then the success breeds from there. And to the extent that you can create this kind of multi-generational buy and consumption, boy, that's nirvana.
Great. And I should have mentioned before, so anybody watching or listening along, feel free to ask any questions. You can see us or hear us. We cannot see you, but we got Chris Decker behind the scenes, and he'll pull up any of the questions or comments. So please feel free to chime in here at any point. So traditionally you think of services consulting for, I'll say, traditional hardware companies, but it's kind of just as valuable, if not more valuable, for kind of SaaS and software companies, right?
Huge. Because look, nobody really ever consumes something "quote unquote" out of the box, right? There's always going to be some customization that's going to go towards that. And it's what's interesting in the 5 or so years that I was with Microsoft, you're really getting down to that atomic level, if you will, with the customer, that buyer, that user, that set of use cases that they're in need of delivering for their end customers. And that requires very deep understanding of the business, understanding of the challenges, the landscape, who's buying, what they're buying, why they're buying it. Those are very interesting dynamics, and then being able to architect that solution. And invariably, I would say this as well. Kevin Purcell talked last week about VSEM, vision, strategy, execution, metrics, and I know he was talking about it more in the context of business plans or territory plans. And yes, those are typically the case, but you can apply that same kind of an approach to a customer. Let's be honest, right? There's a lot of customers that have a vision, right, of what they're trying to do with the technology. May not be the exact vision that they ultimately deliver to, but they don't necessarily have, or they may not necessarily have a fully thought out strategy, let alone a plan of execution, let alone how are they going to measure the success of this. So there's an opportunity there to be that. Again, I'm going to go back to that partner, that co-innovation, co-invested partner that says, look, we're going to be on this journey together with you. And I think at the end of the day, that's where customers will separate. Phil Castillo used a couple of weeks ago this term, commission breath, right? Separate, those that have the commission breath who are trying to land something this month, this quarter, with, hey, there's a longer term relationship and longer term outcome that we're trying to deliver.
Awesome. We have a question here from Jimmy Burns. We'll break it up in 2 parts. So the first one is, would you recommend working in a larger company or a startup? My perspective is, just get in anywhere. My daughter Shannon started at Oracle. Truth be told, I tried to get her to go to a smaller company, but you get at the bigger company, get great training, great structure. Now she's at a smaller company, and with a smaller company, you get kind of a great broad perspective. When I started EMC, it was tiny, so I had a great appreciation I knew all the other functional departments, how the company operates. So at the end of the day, I would say don't agonize. Pick whatever company you're into in terms of liking the people, liking the culture. And these days, different from when Chris and I grew up. I mean, we used to have to stay somewhere, 5 or 10 years. These days, you can go somewhere for a year. You don't like it, you can go somewhere else. Yeah. Chris, what's your perspective on the big company versus small company?
Yeah, of course, I'm going to be a bit biased because I've done nothing but large. And I do totally agree with your comments about, structure. I mean, starting your career, it's very important. And I think it is even today. I don't think it necessarily matters whether it's large or small. But I think it's, you can build your career, and then I think you can have a lot of value taking the large company to, something smaller. I also believe that works in reverse. And I've seen that many, many times with people over the years. The second part of this question is interesting. Jimmy, I'm a huge believer, ardent believer. And if you look at my resume, I've lived this in my career of rotation. I am totally into rotation. And if you think about what I'm saying there in rotation, rotate from sales into services, into customer success, into a worldwide role, back into a local geographic or country kind of role. It gives you incredible perspective. My first 14 years of career, all of which at IBM, 12 of those 14 years were in the field here in the Northeast, sales leadership. And I thought I knew everything, and I didn't. And I was kicked in the pants and told, your time is done in the field. You're not going to get another promotion. It's time for you to go do, quote unquote, a corporate role. And I did it kicking and screaming. I wish I had done it sooner in my career. Because all of a sudden, you're looking at the world, not just through the local Northeast. Now you're looking at it through, the US, North America, the Americas, traveling and getting perspective on things that, gosh, I wish I had earlier in my career. So I'm a big believer of rotation. I live it everywhere I've been. I push it with everyone in my organization. And I'll share a quick story, and I don't know if it actually was designed this way. When I joined IBM, coming out of college, I joined IBM in Hamden, Connecticut, right outside of New Haven, Randy. We probably bumped into each other in a few places. And I was fortunate for a very short period of time to work for a branch manager in a branch office at IBM. His name was Sam Palmisano. And Sam eventually became CEO, many people know. And Sam was gracious to do some mentoring for me back in the early days of my career while his career was on fire. And, I remember this vividly, and I've shared this for many years. He said, Chris, your career is like a stair step. Yeah, that's about right, Sam. Okay, got it. What's your point? And he said, you should never try to master every step in the stair in your career. Get to 80%. The last 20% becomes de minimis, right? Do 80%, learn, and then go to the next step. Now that staircase could be really steep, like a staircase in Greece or Italy or up a mountainside, right? That was Sam's career. Or that staircase could be a typical staircase, or it could be even a flatter staircase. There's no rhyme or reason to this. But attempt to master 80% of that, because the last 20% is de minimis. And I actually, as I look back, I think that makes an awful lot of sense, Jimmy. And so rotation is big for me, and getting that diversity of experience is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my 2 cents is I'd say start in sales, because if you know sales, that's keys to the kingdom for everything else. Totally agree with what Chris said in terms of kind of the rotation side. You can also throw in channel, probably is another good one there. And some other thoughts on some specific people. I was talking this morning, Emily Fernando runs marketing at Bug Crowd. She started out as an SDR, and we're talking about, okay, how valuable is that? No offense to marketing leaders, but most marketing leaders didn't carry a bag. They didn't do, the inside sales thing. So by Emily doing that, it just makes her so much more appreciative, understanding, and effective as a marketing leader. And then on the other side of things, if you want to figure out, I think, what do you want to do? Somebody like a Dave Donatelli, who known for a long time. He's current CEO of Riverbed. Was with him here Monday night, and he did a great job over time. He had kind of sales jobs, he had marketing jobs, had operations jobs, had engineering jobs, product jobs. That's an awesome way to get cultivated for CEO or big company GM type roles as well. And then for those that may not be in sales, or you don't really want to have a full-time job on the go-to-market side. I was with somebody at an event in New York, Vicky Lee, who's runs finance at Hitachi of all places, that I said, hey, it'd be great if you can be an executive sponsor for some companies. And then that way you get a really good understanding for the field and where you're at and what's going on and how you can help. And the sales team would probably learn a lot from you. You learn a lot from the sales team as well. So anyway, so Jimmy, thanks so much for those questions. Anybody else, feel free to chime in with any comments or questions. So I guess to put a wrapper on the services consulting side of things, anything else that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, It's interesting. I also, I'll share this. Scott Clark ingrained this into me a long time ago. You can never be, you can never convince everyone in the organization of, driving solution services, right? There's always going to be some number of folks. And I always, whenever I come into one of these situations, I always coach the team to think about finding, if you break up the population into thirds, 30% get it right away and are going to drive it, whatever it is, right away, right? Those are your adopters, those are your leading edge people, whatever. Then there's 30% who are sitting there waiting to see how the first group do, right? What's their level of success? And then there's another population, let's say 30, 40% that just doesn't get it, never will. Focus on the first 30%, right? Lead with the first 30%, make them wildly successful, use them to showcase the capability, the success, the excitement that can be driven, and that will bring along that next 30%. And that's what you're going to need, right, to be successful, right? The other 40%, they're going to just kind of fall off and go away, and they're kind of going to do their thing, right? If you focus on that first 30%, and I think this applies not only to the sellers, but also even just customers, right? Focus on them, go very deep with them, be successful with them, and that'll lead you to that next horizon of folks. And I think you'll be just fine.
Awesome. So moving off the title topic, a few other questions. So if you think about mentors that you've had, advice you've received from them, any kind of one or two in particular you want to point out?
Yeah, I shared the one on Sam already. I think another one that I learned a long time ago, and actually it was during the whole VCE moment, and I'll give you the context here. I didn't know how to start a joint venture. None of us did, right? There are very few companies, tech companies, that have ever done joint ventures. At that time, I think the only one that really did was Accenture and Microsoft, Avanade. And that was actually used as kind of the model of success. So nobody really knew how to do this. And as we were going through this, you felt as though with the focus and the exposure from the three companies, the CEO levels, the boards, that you had to have everything right. You had to be right. And Gary Moore, who I was part of his organization, and he actually asked me to go do this. He was running services for Cisco, and then he became one of the two co-COOs underneath John Chambers. Rob Lloyd was the other one. And Gary's coaching to me one day was, hey, Chris, don't feel like you got to have the answer to everything. You don't need to be a know-it-all. In fact, use this opportunity to be a learn-it-all. Right? Listen, get perspective, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to have a perspective that says, what the hell are we doing? Together a joint venture. And by the way, why would we put together a joint venture with EMC? And don't you realize that most joint ventures in the tech space fail? You got to listen to those perspectives. You got to gain those perspectives. You got to take that input, and you got to shape accordingly. And so it was incredible advice. Again, I wish I had this earlier in my career, because it helped me start to think about perspective and getting 360 degrees of perspective when you're making very important, big kinds of decisions, and versus just react for reaction's sake, which was, by the way, my style. And some would argue still to a degree is a lot of my style today. And you need to have that ability, to be decisive and make a decision. But I think it's got to be with, perspective as well. So, that was a big moment for me. And I give Gary a ton of credit for that coaching in that period of time. Things were moving very fast.
Awesome. And if you think about the notion with we had X Factor as the sponsor, so the kind of notion and importance of value selling, especially these days, any perspectives there?
Yeah, I think it's everything, right? And again, value selling doesn't have to be services led or solution led, but I think that's where customers are more apt to take the phone call and to consume. And so, having the perspective around what is that value, and value is going to be perceived or taken differently from customer to customer. And even I've seen customers within the same enterprise, right? Depending upon who you're selling to, that value and how you position value is going to be different. So value is always going to be derived from, frankly, your listening skills, right? Your empathy skills with the customer, and trying to put yourself into the position that they're in, and what they're trying to achieve. Maybe some of the headwinds that they're trying to achieve it in, financial, operational, competitive, what have you. And so I think the value is derived in that listening and empathy skills that all of us can and should be developing.
Yeah, especially with this market, right? Everybody's trying to cut spend. Right. So if you're selling whatever solution and you can equate that, as you said, the financial operating metrics, say, hey, here's how we can help you generate revenue. Here's how we can help you save money. Maybe it's a compliance solution. Here's how we can help you, stay out of jail, right? So those things would be things that the CFO would be all over versus other proposals that are just a bunch of techno mumbo jumbo, right? You could have the art of being able to do that is something that companies really need to master, and that's something X Factor does. So
I would also say one other thing, Randy, as I'm thinking about this, storytelling. Storytelling is critical, right? If you don't have storytelling skills and being able to tell a very rich story in the words or the terms of customer, right, you're probably not going to be successful, right? And that may be saying the obvious, but I've seen it, and I'm sure you have seen it so many times, right? Sellers and others kind of come to things from the perspective of the company and the technology that company is driving. That's great. It's great that you know that and you have that depth. Frankly, I don't at times, I'll be honest. But rather, how do you put yourself in that customer's shoes and be able to tell the story in terms that they'll be able to identify and go, oh, that's obvious. I get that. Like generative AI, right? That's a great opportunity today to tell stories and use case stories that people will go, oh, okay, is it that? That's simple. I got that. I could do that.
Yeah. and if you don't know, you could ask it, hey, tell me a story about.
Yeah. I've done that a few times.
That's crazy. I was at a GTM fund event last night. Scott Barker, we're talking about storytelling, then Brian Cotter from Seismic, but just kind of that art and notion versus where now the generations are becoming so kind of more coin operated. They're relying on technology. They got the outbound. They got it's okay. So you need to have some art around kind of this whole notion, and really nothing better than storytelling to explain what you do and how you do it and how you've done it. More importantly for others, right?
Right. Absolutely. Totally.
All right. Well, time flies when we're having fun. What were you going to say?
I said, indeed, it is. Indeed.
There you go. So we know each other a bit, not as well as some other guests, but any PG Randy story to tell?
Well, I shared one earlier, and genuinely, your advice, to get yourself out there and do what I'm doing right now, and I couldn't be any more grateful for that. But the one that I do remember, and I know some of your prior guests and those watching will laugh when they hear this, but I remember when we, Cisco, were in the midst of coming to market with this unified compute system, right? Next generation compute. And of course, in those days, for context, for those that may not know this, Hewlett Packard was a huge, in fact, I think one of the largest partners for Cisco. And so this was going to be a huge gamble. And I remember John Chambers going to see Mark Hurd, rest in peace, to let him know that we were getting in the compute space. And that wasn't a very good day. Things fell apart from there. But there was this picture that kept going around that kind of it incented all of us at Cisco. Yeah. Of this guy over at HP, this guy by the name of Randy, who was let's just say not very kind to the UCS platform.
Yeah, they said my predict Steve Burke at CR, and he said, "Okay, Randy, make a little run through the hall. Okay, hey, any predictions?" I'm like, "Yeah, UCS is dead in a year." That was it. Yeah, I remember it very well.
Yeah.
I'd have friends at sales meetings, and Chambers would be putting it up, and blah blah blah. Right?
Absolutely, and that was motivation, pure motivation for guys like Frank Palumbo and Dom Delfino and myself and Scott Clark, and there's a whole cast of characters. But it's funny how the world goes, right? You compete, but then you cooperate, and here we are cooperating, and that's the fun story about Randy. But there's a lot, and you and I have. In fact, I think one of the other ones we were talking about not too long ago was your early days at EMC, running around in the Northeast when I was leading the AS400 business, and you were out ripping out IBM memory, which was of greater value in the market, and putting in EMC memory, and it was 2 for 1, in some cases 3 for 1, and just trying to keep up. And I remember that. I didn't realize that the guy that was doing that I was chasing was this guy, Randy Seidl. So I'm sure there's many more of those if we just have a bottle of wine.
There you go. Lots of really great sellers for sure. So anyway, Chris, you've been awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. Great perspectives. Next week, we've got Amit Bendov, who's the CEO of Gong. His title topic is going to be The Future is Now, AI-Powered Revenue Team Transformation. It's going to be Tuesday morning, East Time, 9:30 to 10:30. He's staying put in Israel, given the unfortunate circumstances and everything that's happening over there. So we certainly pray for everybody. So Chris McCarthy, thank you. Chris Decker, behind the scenes, thank you so much for your help. X Factor, thank you for your sponsorship. If you want to have a great operating plan and turn it into an always-on operating plan, X Factor can help you, as well as has a terrific value selling platform that you can use. For those that are members of Sales Community, thanks. For those that are not, feel free to go to salescommunity.com/fall free and join. So everybody have a great rest of the week.